That day, my friend Oliver dragged me to a restaurant to meet a rich businessman who had money to invest in our startup. The businessman agreed to give us 5 minutes of his time. We looked like rich people. Chic suits, high status watches. We ordered the most expensive dishes on the menu. But it was all fake. The watches were replicas and the suits were for rent. Oliver pawned his grandmother's ring so that we could have dinner here. They'll find us out for sure. The businessman still didn't show up, and I was about to leave when a girl came up to our table. How pretty she was. It turned out that we had been booked at the same table by mistake. Oliver immediately invited the girl to join us. She said yes. I haven't had a nice relationship with a girl in a long time, therefore, what if this was my chance? Her name was Harriet. She was supposed to have dinner with a friend, but she just canceled their meeting. We got talking, and in order to not lose my face, I said that I come to this restaurant, constantly. Like I went to a good college and that we have our own business, which brings in a lot of money. You should have seen Oliver's face. I was so used to playing a rich guy that I didn't recognize myself. By the end of the evening, I was so emboldened that I asked Harriet to meet again, and she agreed. And the rich guy didn't show up for the meeting, so it seemed like he wasn't gonna waste his time on us at all. On the way home, Oliver kept talking about the business, and that we could do it without being rich. Our project would start making money soon, but, of course, I didn't listen to him. I only thought about her. Oliver understood everything from my stupid smile, and he immediately decided to break off my whole buzz. A gorgeous girl has gorgeous requests, he confidently stated, and unfortunately, he was right, because I lied to her about everything. I have no bank account, no education, and the only thing I have is our startup. The day was set for the next day, but I wasn't gonna back it up no matter what. When I got home, my mother was already asleep. I moved in with her when her health got worse. The doctors said that they needed a kidney transplant. After my dad died, I had to take care of my mother, and I wanted to make her happy. We sold almost everything, but in the end, we collected the necessary amount, and now all that was left was to wait in line for the surgery. Soon, Harriet texted me. She thanked me for dinner and said that she loved the lobsters. Man, I set the bar too high. I started searching through the cabinets for anything else that could be quickly sold to raise at least some money, and I came across a box with my mother's stash for surgery. No, stop. The idea of taking money from there was very bad. And I hope Harriet doesn't just like me because I'm allegedly a rich dude. The next day, I took Harriet to the park and gave her a bunch of daisies. She asked, "Is this a joke?" Harriet was ready to leave, and I was scared. I lied that this was a hoax, and the real date would be at my favorite restaurant. We took a taxi, and I made up an excuse to stop near my house. I said I was helping the poor, and I needed to check on one of them. Harriet said it was very nice, but she'd rather wait in the car. Phew, close call. I flew into the apartment and reached into the closet for the stash. "I'll pay you back. Honestly, I hope Mom doesn't notice anything." At the restaurant, Harriet cheered up, and I was very happy about it. And days went by, Harriet was really happy, because I always gave her expensive gifts. A week later, she started inviting me to hang out with her richy friends. The rich world just blinded me. But I kept thinking that the money was running out. One day, Oliver called me and told me that we were finally rich. Of course, he was joking, but yeah. The startup brought in the first money, which means that I will return everything I took from my mother's stash. But my entire share of the profit had been spent on an expensive bracelet for Harriet, which she begged for the same day. She was thrilled, and at the end of the evening, she invited me to a family dinner. She said that she had serious feelings for me, which meant it was time to meet her parents. Wow, I was beginning to think that she was only with me for the money. But getting to know your parents is an important step. Such trust. X day has arrived. We went to Harriet's parents' house, but I couldn't find a place for myself. I thought they'd figured me out in a heartbeat. In the end, it turned out to be much worse than I imagined. First, her family lived in a mansion, where I felt uncomfortable. And secondly, her dad immediately flooded me with questions. Where I studied, who I work for, and what I do in life. I had to repeat the usual lie. I study at a prestigious college and work on a successful project. Harriet's mother immediately liked me, but her father looked at me suspiciously. After dinner, Harriet showed me to the house. Her father had a fancy office. We talked in the luxurious chairs, and for the first time that evening, I relaxed a little. Suddenly, Harriet got up and went to the safe. She asked me to be quiet. She was going to borrow some money from her dad. As I understand it, her father didn't spoil Harriet with money, so she stole it from his safe, a little at a time. What a familiar situation. I watched as she fearfully dialed the numbers on her father's safe. It was strange that such a large amount of money was kept under the PIN code 1111. When we said goodbye to Harriet's parents, her father took me aside and asked if I had prepared a gift for Harriet. Her birthday was coming up. I immediately lied that I had a necklace with large rubies. As luck would have it, Harriet heard this and started thanking me. What have I done? Where will I get the money from? I was as dark as a cloud when I got home, and then my mother decided to finish me off completely. She will get surgery in 2 days. The doctor called and said that there was a free place. They just needed her consent. Mother was so happy. She started to hug me, but I snapped at her. This stupid surgery was completely out of time. My mother asked what was wrong with me, but I just mumbled that everything was fine and ran into the room. I couldn't sleep at night. How could I get the money in 2 days? There was no point in asking Oliver, since he was handing over bottles to buy noodles to feed himself. The next morning, I went to several banks, but none of them wanted to give a loan to a ragamuffin with a weird startup. I was so desperate that I even considered robbing a bank. Stop. Harriet's rich dad wouldn't even notice if a few pathetic $1,000s go missing from his safe. The safe is full of money, and I remember the code. Why didn't I think of this before? I started preparing for the robbery. I made a mask out of the hat and figured out how to get around the cameras and security. That night, I went to Harriet's house. Luck was on my side. I waited until a couple of thugs had moved away from the wall and jumped over it. But there was a real giant with my club. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. As soon as he was gone, I ran to the front of the door. The office was on the second floor, where I crept on tiptoe. My hands were shaking with excitement as I typed in the code on the safe. That's it, Steve. There's no turning back. Now, you're not only a liar, but also a thief. When the safe was opened, I quickly stuffed the money into my pockets and went on the stairs. I was about to go down to the first floor, but Harriet's father was standing right next to me. Damn it! I tried to slip past him, but he heard footsteps and noticed me. The old man tried to grab hold of me and pulled off the mask. I fearfully rushed away and hit him with my shoulder, not on purpose. In the next second, he was falling head over heels. Suddenly, I heard a crunch. I wanted to see if he was all right, but there was no time. I might be caught, and I ran away. On the way home, I told myself that he had hurt himself and nothing terrible had happened to him, but I definitely got caught. He saw my face and he must have recognized me. Harriet called me the next morning. She cried for a long time and said that her father was attacked at night. My heart skipped a beat, and my hands shook with excitement. Suddenly, he had something to say. I nervously asked if the cameras caught the attacker, but I was lucky, because Harriet said you couldn't see his face, and that her father was in a coma, but the doctors didn't tell them to hope for the best. God, how lucky I am. If only she knew that her father was in a coma because of me. I was so scared that I even thought of turning myself into the police. But I knew it would only make things worse for everyone. I had to wait for Harriet's dad to wake up. Wait, what if he doesn't remember anything, and everything will just be as before? My mother's surgery went successfully, and she didn't notice the loss of money. We wanted this for so long, and I couldn't even be happy for my own mother. Oliver and I were already making good money in our business, and within a few days, I had quietly returned the stolen money to Harriet's father's safe. I was on pins and needles for a few weeks. I wanted Harriet to leave me alone, but in such a difficult situation, she needed support and gifts. Again. And then Harriet's father woke up. I did not want to go in to see him at all, but Harriet said he wasn't thinking straight, and he wasn't talking right now. She asked me to come, and I agreed. Her father looked bad. He could barely breathe, but he still found the strength to sit up and point a finger at me, whispering, "You." Fortunately, he didn't have time to finish. His eyes rolled back and his mouth foamed. The doctors tried to resuscitate him. As we sat in the waiting room, Harriet anxiously waited for her father to get better, and I knew I was finished. I needed a distraction, so I suggested a snack. I brought us sandwiches and instant coffee from the vending machine. Last supper on the loose. Harriet was acting up again, and haughtily said that she didn't eat gluten. Who would doubt it? Suddenly, the doctor came out of the room and mournfully looked at Harriet. They couldn't do anything. Harriet slid to the floor and sobbed. At this moment, her mother rushed into the hospital. She ran up to her daughter and began to calm her down. 2 states were fighting in me. I hated myself for what I had done. Even if it was an accident, I killed a man. Although, on the other hand, it was difficult to contain my joy, because no one would know my terrible secret. I took one last look at poor Harriet and left the hospital, and that was the end. We never met again. I went too far for her.
I've been banging on the cafe's WC door for 15 minutes now. Man, couldn't stay there for an hour. I was wearing a gorgeous cutout dress and this fool hesitated and went to the toilet as soon as he saw me. Well, you're not a hottie either, you know. Stooped boy with greasy hair. The waiter came up to me and said that there was no one in the toilet. Dave ran away. In the evening, I returned home completely broken. I don't know what I did wrong. I looked at myself in the mirror. My friend at school said I was lucky to be cheesy and to have a nice face, as the guys are crazy about it. But that dude ran away as soon as he saw me. Maybe I'm just too much for him. This thought calmed me down a little, but I had to find the guy. As there was only a week and a half left to the prom, and I still don't know who I was going there with. There wasn't much time left, and I decided to change the profile photo on the dating site, especially since I hadn't changed my clothes after a failed date yet. But as soon as I chose the angle and arched in front of the camera, my mother came into the room. She had always been strict, but now she looked at me and went mad. She said that I was dressed vulgarly and that I disgraced the family by posting such photos. She took a sweater out of the closet and told me to change immediately. Okay, Mom, just stop yelling like that. She closed the door behind her, and at that moment, I received a text message. Some guy was asking me out. In the photos, he seemed confident. Certainly better than that loser who ran away from me. Maybe I still have a chance to find a date for the prom. I woke up very early to have time to choose a nice look and do my makeup. But it turns out that my closet was completely empty. Did Mom decide to throw all my clothes away? I was furious. And I decided that as soon as she returned from work, I would tell her everything. It was only an hour before the date. I was ashamed, but I couldn't go naked. I had to put on that granny sweater. On the way, it seemed to me that everyone was looking around and laughing at me. But surprisingly, Joe liked the sweater. He said I looked like a true lady in that outfit. Thanks for your tact, Joe. The date was going fine, but we were sitting by the fireplace and I was sweating from the heat. Finally, I decided to take off that sweater and stayed in one thin t-shirt. Joe immediately quieted down and stared at me. I didn't understand what happened. But suddenly he said that he had to go. Like he allegedly had some urgent problems with the water pressure at home. At home, I tried to convince myself that I got myself and stayed in vain. Maybe Joe really had something serious going on. But when I decided to call him and check how things were going, it turned out that Joe blocked me. I lay in my room and thought what those guys didn't like about me that much. And suddenly, I heard a beep. And it was a new message. Maybe one of my dates decided to apologize for running away? But no. It was another guy from a dating site. His name was Tom. I wasn't sure I wanted to go on a failed date again. But Tom looked so handsome. Tall and athletic. And as it turned out, he was fond of natural sciences. I know you can't tell by my looks, but I love biology and want to go to medical school, in which Tom is just studying. Wow. I wanted to learn more about college and the upcoming exams, so I finally agreed to meet Tom at the coffee shop. The day before the date, I prepared my best outfit. Fortunately, my mom didn't throw away my things, but just washed them. I was so worried that I even came to the cafe ahead of time. And then I saw Joe at the next table. The one who blocked me. He sat with a girl and sweetly chatted with her. Oh, you. I went up to him and started yelling. How could you do this to me? Joe blushed and said I'd lied to him. He likes girls with small chests, and I have a big one. And I had a different photo on the dating site. What the heck is he talking about? He took out his phone and showed me. The ABC of Loyalty website. There was a picture of me, but I had small boobs. And I looked completely different in a long dress and a headscarf. Someone registered me there and photoshopped my photos. Joe said if I had smaller breasts and less provocative manners, he would have stayed. What an idiot! I turned and ran to the bathroom. I didn't know who registered me on that website, but now it was clear why the guys were running away. All because of my big breasts. I looked out at the bathroom and Tom was already sitting at the table, and then I realized that most likely he found me on the same website, which means I'm definitely not going to live up to his expectations. Crouching, I made my way to the exit. He didn't seem to notice me. On the way, I wrote to him that I was not feeling well and would not come. I came home in a terrible mood. Mother came into my room to ask me something, and I just burst into tears and told her everything. I don't usually have much of a heart-to-heart conversation with her, but I felt so bad. I said that I liked Tom and I was afraid to go to a meeting with him because of my breasts. My mother hugged me and began to calm me down. She said I shouldn't show my breasts, and she was right. I decided that I would do everything to make my breasts seem smaller because Tom likes this. I immediately texted him that I was ready to see him. The next day, I wrapped my chest in bandages and went on a date with Tom. I even put on that stupid sweater so Tom wouldn't notice. The date was great, but I was always afraid that Tom would find out about the bandages. And when he tried to hug me, I immediately pulled away. Tom pretended not to notice, but at the end of the date, when Tom walked me home, he told me I was great and that he was looking forward to seeing me again. I spent the whole evening thinking about Tom. Does he really like me? I shared it with my mom. Maybe he doesn't care about breast size, and I can take off the bandages. But my mother began to say that I looked depraved with big breasts, and as soon as he sees it, he would immediately run away. I was shocked by my mother's words, but I was afraid of losing Tom. What if Mom was right? On the second date, Tom said he wanted me to meet his friends. Wow. It's so cool. The main thing is that no one knows what I'm hiding. At the party, it always seemed to me that I did not tighten the bandages on my chest well. I ran to the bathroom every 5 minutes to fix the bandages that were coming out from under my crop top. Once again, when I was rewinding my breasts in the toilet, a girl noticed me. Heck, that's all I needed. But I quickly lied that I had recently been in an accident. The girl made a sympathetic face and left. She seemed to believe me. I was just calming down when one of the guys offered to play strip cards. Not again. I lasted a few rounds, but I still lost. I had to take off the tunic and stay only in the top. I began to refuse, saying that I was embarrassed, but my friends only made fun of me. One girl reached for my clothes. Now everyone will see the bandages. I couldn't stand it and ran away. I heard Tom calling for me, but I didn't stop. All I could think about was that I'd shame him in front of his friends, and all because of my chest again. I came home and burst into tears. My relationship with the only guy I ever liked is ruined. I had no prom date. Well, at least I could take off the bandages. The skin under them was all bruised. I noticed my mother's tablet on the table in the living room. There was an opened app with that bloody ABC of Loyalty dating website. Out of curiosity, I opened a personal profile, and it was my profile. And on the tab below, there was a photoshopped photo of me. So it was my mother who registered me? The doorbell rang. I didn't want to open it. I had to deal with my mother. The guest called without stopping. Who the heck is there? There was Tom standing in the doorway with a huge bouquet of roses. Came to see if I was alright. I interrupted him and told him that wouldn't work out. Guess I actually have big breasts, and I dress differently. And in general, I'm a completely different person, not the girl from the profile picture. But Tom didn't understand what my breasts and clothing style had to do with it. And then he took my hand and told me that he didn't care about the photos. He cared about me the way I was, and it wasn't about the size of my breasts or my style of clothing. He was fine with me. I looked at Tom and didn't believe what was happening. And at that moment, my mother came out to us. She heard their conversation and lowered her eyes. She admitted that it was she who posted the photos on the ABC of Loyalty website 6 months ago, and she added that in her youth, guys were only interested in her body and no one was interested in what kind of person she was. Thanks, Mom. I knew you meant well, but now I'll do everything on my own. I took Tom's hand and we left. By the way, as you can imagine, I didn't go to prom alone.
I was on one knee in front of my girlfriend Mia, and the whole restaurant was staring at us frozen. I asked in a trembling voice, "Will you marry me?" But Mia was suspiciously silent for a long time. I was already nervous. And then she sighed. "I'm sorry, I have a new guy." The world seemed to collapse. Mia excused herself and ran out of the restaurant. Speechless, I slowly sat down on the chair. It never occurred to me that Mia would not only reject me, but also would cheat on me. In middle school, I fell in love with this short brunette with beautiful brown eyes. We started dating. When I went to college, she moved in with me. There wasn't enough money for everything. I got a job at an advertising agency. I had to work around the clock, and I started spending very little time with Mia. She certainly didn't like it very much, but I thought she understood everything. I tried for our sake. I wanted us to live well together and not need anything. I always told her that I loved her. Weren't words enough? And now when I finally decided to propose to her, Mia had a new guy. She left, and I just sat there, finishing my third glass of wine. My heart was so heavy, so I dialed Zane, my best friend. Zane was trying to say something, but I wasn't really listening. I didn't even notice that I was walking into the roadway during the conversation. I was suddenly deafened by the car's horn. The last thing I remembered was a blinding glare of the headlights. When I opened my eyes, it took me a long time to recover. Was this a hospital? I had a terrible headache. I tried to remember what had happened, but then the door bursted open and a guy bursted in. When I looked closely, I didn't recognize his face. "Who are you?" He came up to me and, with a sigh, he blurted out, "I'm Zane, your best friend. There was an accident. The doctor said you had a severe head injury and possibly partial memory loss." My stomach went cold with horror. Heck, Zane? Don't I remember his face? Wait, what about Mia? She must be worried. I took off running, but he shook his head and said sadly, "I'm sorry, man, but Mia left you." It was like being doused with ice water. But how? I remembered how good we were together. I wanted to propose to her, but Zane told me not to worry. He would find a girl 100 times better for me, the one who would truly love me very deeply. I smiled weakly and thanked Zane. "Thank you for being here." I was soon released from the hospital and somehow got back to work. Zane immediately started a profile for me on Tinder with my picture on it, and some cute girl immediately wrote me. I thought it was a good attraction. We decided to meet in a cafe. I came there straight from work and sat down at a table. Once in this cafe, I ate pancakes with Mia. The memory warmed my chest. The waitress came up to the table and told me to get lost. I looked at the girl in surprise. Her brown eyes seemed familiar, but she suddenly turned around and left. This was the first time I had met such a rude waitress. Maybe I didn't remember something, but just as I was about to get up, a tall blonde from Tinder came up to the table. Her name was Cheryl, and she sat down across from me and immediately started talking about proper nutrition. Cheryl talked for about 3 hours, and I was yawning when I noticed the waitress standing next to the bar. She was watching us intently, but when she saw me looking at her, she turned away abruptly. What had I done to her? Cheryl kept talking, not letting me get a word in. I excused myself, got up, and headed for the door. I didn't think it was going to work out with her. And half an hour later, I was sitting at Zane's house and telling him about our strange date with a beauty from Tinder. I had to admit, I miss Mia. It was so good to be with her. Could we get back together? But Zane protested. Mia was a stinker. She cheated on me. I dropped my head, and Zane was right. Then his phone rang, and Sweetie appeared on the screen. He immediately excused himself somewhat nervously and walked away. Come on, Zane, do you have a girlfriend? As long as I could remember him, he never dated anyone. Because of this, the three of us often went out together. Zane, me, and Mia. As soon as I thought of her, I felt sad again. So wait, there are still a lot of girls on the ground. After waiting for Zane, I talked a little more with him and then opened my Tinder account. It was time to go on a date. Soon I was sitting in the same cafe, but the girl from Tinder did not appear. I waited for her for an hour, which I could have spent on work. Then the negative waitress walked by. She grinned and quipped that I looked like I'd been dumped. But before I could answer, someone stumbled into the cafe, screaming. I turned around and saw a drunk man. He staggered to the sofa at the next table. The smell of alcohol immediately hit my nose. The man whistled, looking at the waitress, and he grabbed her arm as she passed by. What was this asshole doing? I got up and shouted to let the girl go, otherwise I would call the police. But the man only laughed impudently. In the next second, I walked around the table and grabbed the man by the collar. It's time to teach you respect. But the man was strong. He pushed me away. I fell right on the glass table behind me. The paint darkened my vision. I heard the screams of the guards running up and realized that the danger was over. I was quickly escorted out of the cafe. Then the waitress held me up. She looked at my hand in horror. There was a fresh cut there. It looked like I got hurt when I fell on the table. The waitress immediately took me to the back room to treat the wound, and she was nice to me for the first time. And suddenly, she thanked me for standing up for her. It's nothing, any guy would do the same. She touched my hand and said she didn't think I was so caring. What do you mean? But she immediately caught herself and left the back room, saying that it was time for her to work. I could still feel her touch. And then I decided to wait until the end of the shift to take her home. Maybe I might have a chance with her, right? After closing, I met her right at the exit and offered to walk her home. All I could hear was my heart pounding. I was like a schoolboy. The waitress looked at me mysteriously. I thought she would refuse, but then she smiled at me weirdly and said, "Let's try it." I decided to introduce myself and immediately asked her name. "Call me a stranger," she replied. "Okay, a stranger." We talked on the way. We started discussing movies, and it turned out that we were Marvel fans. And when I asked her what her favorite dish was, I was stunned. She was crazy about pancakes and jam, just like me. As soon as we reached her house, I decided it was time. My heart was pounding in my chest. I looked into her eyes and reached out to kiss her, but she suddenly recoiled. "Are you out of your mind?" It was like being doused with ice water. "What's wrong?" I asked. But the stranger just left without answering or even saying goodbye. The next day, after work, I met Zane and told him about the stranger who had turned me down. I thought I'd met the one and she'd rejected me. Heck, she was even better than Mia. But Zane said I was too obsessed, so I didn't let anything new come into my life. He grabbed my phone and immediately opened Tinder and made a few more dates. I didn't resist. The stranger turned me down, but none of the girls could compare to the waitress from the cafe. I couldn't get her smile out of my head, and I compared each girl to her. In the end, I couldn't stand it. If I fell in love, then I needed to pursue it and not sit still. I had an appointment for work that evening, but I canceled. Bought a huge bouquet of flowers and headed to the same cafe. My stranger was standing at the bar. I plucked up the courage to go to her and hand her a bouquet of flowers. I stammered out, "I will prove myself worthy of you. Just give me one chance." She was about to say something, but suddenly Zane came into the cafe and came up to us. What was he doing here? Zane suddenly hugged the stranger and frowned, throwing a displeased look at me. My jaw almost dropped. I tried to swipe her friend's girlfriend? From embarrassment, I wished for the ground to swallow me up. I took one last glance at the waitress and ran out of the cafe. I wandered the streets thinking about the situation with Zane and his girlfriend. The stranger, it turned out. I took another step, and then a car honked loudly. I shuddered. It passed just a millimeter away from me. At that moment, it dawned on me. I suddenly realized that I remembered everything. I had a sudden vision of Mia's face. A lot of emotions surged at the same time. The stranger waitress was Mia, my girlfriend. So stop, but why was Zane with her? Then I realized that Mia had left me for him. My best friend. But then I began to remember how little attention I paid to her, and because of my work, I often ignored her requests to go out together. Mia told me more than once how much she missed me, and I worked all the time. What a fool I was. I messed it up myself. Heck, but Zane, how could he do that? I clenched my fists. He had been hiding the truth all this time and manipulating me under the guise of supporting me, and all of that in order to take my girlfriend. I just turned around. He couldn't leave it like this. It was time to sort things out with Zane. I decided to go back to the cafe hoping Zane was still there. It was late, and there was almost no visitors. I was looking for Zane when I heard Mia's voice clearly coming from the back room. I listened. Mia was telling someone in a trembling voice, almost crying, that she still loved me. In recent days, when I was courting her, she realized I was her destiny, and that she regretted dumping me, and it happened all like this. And then I heard Zane's voice, who kept saying that he was better than me, that I'd give up on Mia again like I did before. Hearing his words, I threw open the door and walked in just as Zane pushed Mia. Mia! I managed to catch her and then glared at my former friend. Didn't expect me to remember everything, buddy. Zane tried to hit me, but I dodged him. I immediately hit him back. He would know, jerk. After that, Zane, with his hand against his nose, sarcastically wished us domestic bliss and left. I hugged Mia. So we stood in silence for 20 minutes. Then I came around and whispered, "Will you go on a date, stranger?" We never broke up again, and a month later I proposed to her again. Guess what she said? And I also realized if you love a person, words alone are not enough. The main way to show your love is to give your time and care. Did you like this video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel, folks. Thank you so much.